I think one of the things we tend to forget is that, yes, all of the tactics and new technology and all this stuff is great, but relationships still sell. Relationships still build empires. Relationships are still critical for business. And you can't automate that. And it may sound cliche, but it's just so true. People do business with guys like you and me, Rocky, because they know us, like us, and trust us, not because we have amazing technology, not because we have an amazing, sexy sales page. It's because the relationship factor, they trust us, they know us, they like us, right? So for me, relationships, I've always been a bit of a talker, and podcasting for me was an easy way to use my some would call it a talent, some others wouldn't, as a way to get my foot in the door for a lot of times and build relationships with cool people that would eventually either turn into maybe just a great relationship, friendship, or a business partnership of some sort.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Luis Diaz, who is the founder of Podcast Domination. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today, we're going to start with a story. Once upon a time, a daughter complained to her father that her life was miserable and that she didn't know how she was going to make it. She was tired of fighting and struggling all the time. It seemed just as one problem was solved, another one soon followed. Her father was a chef. He took her into the kitchen and he filled 3 pots with water. He placed each of them up on high for the water to boil. And then in one he placed potatoes. In the next he placed eggs. And in the last one he placed ground coffee. He let them sit and boil without saying a word to his daughter. The daughter moaned and impatiently waited, wondering what he was doing. After about 20 minutes, he turned off the burners. He took the potatoes out, put them in a bowl, same with the eggs and the coffee. He then asked the daughter, "What do you see?" And she said, "Potatoes, eggs, and coffee." "Look closer," he said, and touched the potato. She did, and she noted that the potatoes were soft. He then asked her to take an egg and break it. After pulling off the shell, she observed the hard-boiled egg. Finally, he asked her to sip the coffee. Its rich aroma brought a smile to her face. She asked her dad, "What does this mean?" He explained that the potatoes, the eggs, and coffee each faced the same adversity, boiling water. However, each one reacted differently. The potato went in strong, hard, and unrelenting. But in boiling water, it became soft and weak. The egg was fragile, and the thin outer shell protecting its liquid interior until it was put in the water, and then the inside of the egg became hard. However, the coffee was unique. After it was exposed to boiling water, it changed the water and created something new. He asked his daughter, "Which are you? When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean?" So I ask you, many of us are going through struggles this year as we face COVID and constant change and different opportunities. How are you going to respond? Some people are going to give up. They're going to struggle. Some people are going to find resilience. And some people are going to use this opportunity to change the world. It's a choice. You've got to figure out which one you're going to be and how you're going to do it. We all face adversity at some time, and it's a mindset of how we deal with it. Today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk a lot about creating systems and processes and how we manage time and achieve results. We're going to talk about the power of masterminds and coaches and getting help. And we're also going to talk about how podcasts are a great way to build relationships, increase your business, and meet some cool and exciting people. And our guest is going to help us with that. Luis Diaz, after leaving the fitness space as a struggling online trainer, realized something he had been doing for free on the side was his number one asset and skill. After over 50 podcast launches and over 5 million downloads in just 3 years, Luis Ryan Diaz found himself in a new niche. What has started as something he was just helping people with on the side for free could actually be a multi-six-figure business. Now fast forward to today, Luis has launched, consulted, and worked with some of the most well-known entrepreneurs and personal brands online, such as NFL Pro Steve Weatherford, Dan Locke, Joel Marion, and CEO of BioTrust, Shanda Sumpter, Craig Ballantyne, Ben Pakulski, and many more. Today, he works with entrepreneurs, coaches, and business owners inside of his podcast launch formula program to help them launch, grow, and expand their influence using podcasting. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Luis Diaz. It's great to have you join us today.
Rocky, thanks for inviting me on. I am an avid fan, and I was pumped to have you on my podcast last week, so this is fun. Glad we could connect.
As am I, and I'm excited to learn from you today. As always, we start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Little to none. I think kind of similar to you, Rocky, my parents are both immigrants. My father's from the Dominican Republic, grew up very poor. My mother's from England in the countryside. So they both came from farming backgrounds, and money was scarce. So my whole upbringing around money was the general, I guess, if you could, like a mission statement in our family was work very hard, save money, retire at 60, and don't spend money on anything that seems risky. So that was, if I had to put it in a sentence and boil it down, that's really what it was like. I remember my mom, complaining about my dad's spending habits, and I remember her, saving money and telling us not to get the expensive, whether it's the expensive shoes or the expensive, we can't get the expensive shoes or clothes. We can get the other stuff, because it just doesn't make sense, right? Like, why are you going to waste money on things that don't really matter? So my upbringing with money came from two people who were new to the United States. They were working extremely hard, and they had to save every penny to raise their 4 kids. So that was getting into high school and college. The only thing I'll tell you this, Rocky, the only thing I learned in high school about money was I learned how to write a check. And that was it. And I didn't even, and by the time I got out of college and high school, checks weren't really that used much. I'm 28 for context. So we didn't really use checks much when I got out of high school. about 10 or so years ago. And yeah, so that was kind of obsolete. We didn't learn about credit. My mom taught me a little bit about credit, my credit score, and how like if you damage that, you're pretty much your life is over.
Fear.
And yeah, lots of fear. It was a lot of fear. And that hurt me early on in my entrepreneurial career. And I think it does a lot of people. Luckily, I was just green enough behind the ears to go and figure out like, hey, I need to learn from other people, not just my mom and dad, because I looked at their results and I was like, well, they don't have the results I really want, so why would I listen to them about things that I want to achieve, right? So I tried to curate my information intake early on and try to, take what they said with a grain of salt, if that makes sense. So that was my upbringing when it came to money and my understanding of it.
Well, they did give you some good, solid lessons of, I think the biggest problem we all face is overspending. And so if you can control what's going out, that's half the battle right there.
Right.
And then it's about increasing what's coming in, not having to work so hard for it, is to work smarter or to provide more value so that you can get more per an hour. Sounds like you've started to figure out, or you're already doing that as it is, and you're taking somewhat of a different path.
Yeah. What was interesting is that I came from that beginning of like save. And then I went to the opposite of the end of the spectrum, where for a little bit there, my early mid 20s, it was spend. And luckily I had some good mentoring and a coach is like, at the end of every month, you and your accountant, whoever it is on your team, go through every line of your credit card statement, every single line, and say, do we, like, kind of like what we talked about on my show last week. Do you need it? Do you not need it? Okay. Where did this money go? Is it useful? Do we need it? Can we cut it? And, I've been doing that for the last maybe year and a half, 2 years. And that's been a huge turnaround for me. Because you're right. Like some of the things my parents did teach me, they are super valuable. And I'm glad I learned that way instead of, being on the other end of the spectrum when I was really young and having to learn how to save, in my 20s. So I kind of knew that coming in, but I didn't expect it to be as valuable when you're in your early mid 20s and you want to spend and buy everything because you're making a little bit of money. So yeah, I've been on both ends.
That's the traditional path. Most kids come out and all of a sudden you've got money and it's more money than you've ever had before. And so you think it goes a lot further than it does until you start spending it and you realize very quickly, hey, there isn't as much as I thought there was. And that even happened to me in the early part of my life. I was like, oh, this is only $20 a month. This is only $50 a month. I can sign up for this. I can sign up for that. And pretty soon those monthly obligations start to really stifle you. And if you don't do something to change that quickly, then you're just going to continue down that path. And so I think a lot of us go through that in our young 20s. And even though we've been told the lessons, sometimes we have to learn them for ourselves, and that's okay.
Yeah, totally. I think even though they burn a little bit more and they hurt a bit more, you remember them a heck of a lot more. When you're winning, you don't do a lot of reflecting, and then when you're losing, you do a lot of reflecting. I found in my experience, and like those reflective periods have been the most important for me in the next phase of my life. So totally, I can definitely attest to that.
And I highly do recommend going through every single line item, like every month, because it all gets downloaded into my software. But even though it goes into the software, I go through every single line item and I categorize it. And so I see, okay, I spent this, and I go every single transaction. And so I at least feel it to some degree.
Yeah.
And I'll notice if things are out of whack or if we kind of spent somewhere that we didn't. And then sometimes you catch errors or things that shouldn't be charged. And that's another part of it. Not usually that often, but still something to think about.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Case in point, we had a vendor we were working with about a month ago, and for whatever reason, they shut down and they couldn't deliver, and they had overcharged us about $1,500. And had we not gone through our credit card statements multiple times to figure out how much money they owed us, we wouldn't have been able to reclaim that money. So it's that kind of level of detail with these important things. And then I also like what you said there, Rocky. Like, you've got to feel it, and going through the statement makes you feel that payment. Because if it's just a way out of your mind in a credit card statement you don't really go through, you don't feel the payments, and the next thing you know, you're behind in your credit card bills, or you're behind in your payments, because you never really felt the pain of, or the that actual investment. So I really like what you said there, because I can definitely agree with that.
And that's true. It's different with a credit card versus cash. Like, when you count out $100 bills, you have a very different feeling than when you just swipe a card. It's not the same.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And so you kind of have to go through that process. Well, that's cool. So we're here today to talk a little bit about time management. And just before we even recorded, we were even talking on that topic. I know for me these days, it seems like email overwhelms me. There's other parts of things that I need to make sure I get done. And so I'm learning to continually and constantly improve my time management skills. I'd love to hear from you of what your recommendations are to better manage our time.
Cool. This is funny because I don't get to talk about this a lot, Rocky, but in my early to mid 20s, when I was growing my company, I started with myself, obviously. Then I hired 2 other people. Then I soon got to 5 people. Then I soon got to 8 people. And now we're at like 12 people. And through that process, you have to kind of catch up with your level of growth in your business. Sometimes exceeds the level that you've grown personally. And then you get held back because you're not efficient enough with your time, or you're not smart enough with your money to let the business grow further. And that's where I found myself in my probably about a year ago or so. I was really bad with time management. I really didn't understand or have an idea of like where my time was going. Like, I'd spend a whole day and get 2 emails done and a couple social media posts and an interview here and there, and that was my day. And I was like, wow, I don't think I did anything productive today. And I'm like, I can't let this go on. Like, that's how you go out of business. So for me, this comes from a place of, I grew really fast, and then I got lost I got kind of, caught with my pants down because I hadn't grown personally enough to where the people around me were being led properly. Things were getting done. They could count on me. And what this really hurt me was like, I lost my integrity. People didn't see me as a good leader. They didn't see me as a good owner and as a good person, because I was saying things I didn't like. I was saying I would do something and then I wouldn't do it, simply because I couldn't manage my time, and it got lost in the shuffle. And that still happens today sometimes. But for me, the biggest thing I found that helps is by auditing myself. Kind of like when we audit our finances. Like, nowadays I go through a daily EOD, so it's end of day kind of self check. And there are certain things I need to hit and certain things I need to do and document. And what that does, going back to our previous conversation here about feeling the investment, feeling the pain, is if you document or do a daily self-assessment at the end of the day and say, okay, what did I get done today? What didn't I get done? Where did I lose focus? What do I need to delegate, automate, or delete? It's one of my favorite questions in there. If I ask myself these questions, it forces me to go back and look at the day that just went by, as opposed to letting weeks and months go by without really knowing what the heck happened. So I have basically a Google form that I go through and fill out every day, and this is what helps me incrementally get better at time management. Because, like we were saying before, I'm feeling that pain. I'm feeling that frustration again of like, hey, I didn't get anything done today. Well, if you don't do the self-assessment, I found that like you just let it breeze by, and another day rolls by, another day goes, and you don't really feel the pain. You don't feel the burn until it's too late.
So what's on the Google form? Like, what are some of the topics or questions that you put on there?
Sure. I'm going to pull it up right now. I'm going to read them off to you. This is something that my coach taught me to do, and it's been extremely helpful. mind you, I spent 6 months avoiding it and 6 months making excuses as to why I was too busy not to do it. So it's probably been a month now. It's taken me, probably about 6 weeks. It's really, really helped me get laser clear. Like before the 6 weeks, I was probably did it once every 2 weeks. It was horrible. And I didn't reap the benefit of it. But so some of the questions on this form are, number one, did I do my morning formula? So did I do my morning routine? Normally, if I don't do my morning routine, it's my rest of my day is kind of out of whack. I'm not focused. I'm not there, present. I'm not really there. I don't know what I'm fighting for. So question number one is, did I do my morning routine? It's a simple little check, yes or no. And then there's a link to my document, my documented morning formula, I call it, which is something I learned from a coach, that I can go back and say, hey, if I really want to review this right now, I can click that link and I can go there. So that's the first question. Feel free to stop me at any time to dive deeper into these.
I'm going to let you go through the list and then we'll come back and dive.
Perfect. Second question is, did I hit my KPIs today? So my key performance indicators. Did I do my normal content for marketing? Did I check in with certain team members? Did I have any sales calls that day? What happened on those sales calls? What did I do for my personal health? It's a simple little form that's like keeps me accountable to what I need to be doing every day to be successful. That's the second question. Third question is, what season in business am I in? So there's seasons in business: spring, summer, winter, fall. Summer is like a time when you're selling a lot. Spring is where you're doing a lot of marketing. Maybe you're getting ready for a launch. Winter is where you're planning. You're doing your strategic planning and you're not really focused on sales. You're more like team building. And then fall is like where you're in fulfillment, like you're delivering the results to the clients. You're delivering the assets. You're heavy into delivery. So this question helps me figure out like what should I be focused on right now? Because every quarter it's different. Every season is different. So it helps me not get too ahead of myself. So I love that question because it keeps me focused on where I'm at. Next question is, what loops am I committed to closing tomorrow? So Rocky, you probably experienced this where like you'll have some emails that you need to get back to and you don't get to them that day. This helps me write down all the emails and all the people I need to reach out to, all the comments I need to respond to, anything like that are open loops in my mind that may annoy me tomorrow because I'm so cluttered that I don't really know where to begin. That's a question I have here so I can review this again and come back tomorrow to close these loops. Now, the last two questions here. The next one is, where did I fall short? So one of the things could be like, I spent way too much time on social media today, or I did a horrible job at coaching one of my new managers on what they did wrong. So it's a very honest, like, hey, here's what I messed up at. Here's what I need to get better at. And then the last one is, what non-CEO related tasks do I need to delete, delegate, or automate? And this is where the magic is. I love this question because it reminds me of, hey, I don't need to do everything in my business. And there's certain tasks that I need to move off my plate. For example, posting on social media was something I put here literally every day for like 3 weeks. I finally hired and systematized that process. So I'm not the one in there I'm creating the content, but I'm not posting it. I'm not involved in that anymore. And that's my end of day routine. Those are the questions that, for better or worse, help me focus on what I messed up on and what I did good that day.
So let's start with the first one. What does your morning routine look like?
My morning routine is a couple things. Number one, water, at least a cup of water. Number two, either prayer or reviewing my goals. I pick one of those two. I don't do both of them because I get exhausted if it's too much stuff. And then the third thing is journaling. And the journaling is very simple. It's usually like 4 or 5 lines. And it's just the thoughts that are in my head at the time that are consuming my mind and keeping me from focusing on what I need to focus on that time. So it's literally an exercise to just get whatever's on my mind off my mind, and then I can move on to work. Those are the 3 big things in my morning routine. And if I don't do those things, I'm usually off by a little bit. and I'm not as productive or as, present as I should be.
I notice a lot of people are they start their day behind. Like I never had to go deal with rush hour traffic, but occasionally I'd be out in the morning and like people are like flying and going crazy. I'm like, who in the world wants to rush to go to work? I can see rush going home, but for most of you, like, why are you behind? Like you've started the day behind. I guarantee you it's going downhill from here. You got to figure out how to get ahead of your day. And if you can start your morning correctly, as you said, then more often than not, everything else will usually hit their particular goals. For me, 5 days a week, it's exercise, and I'm pretty solid with that. It's the first thing I do with regards to life. So I ensure that I get it done. And then I have a somewhat flexible routine from there that has to do with a lot of the things you talked about and some others that I do. And I do my best to do it every day. And it's okay if it isn't perfect, but do your best. And I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great point there. One of the things I took from my fitness background, I used to do competitive weightlifting, and I used to do competitive bodybuilding. Not bodybuilding, but like physique, which is a different division. Was that even if you suck at it today, you still need to show up. Like my cardio sessions, I literally would start at 8 or 7 a.m., 6:30, and I would tell myself just speed walk. And that's how I get out the house, because it was cold and I didn't want to move. I was in college at the time. I was like, I don't want to do this. But I knew I had to. So I was like, okay, we'll just get out of the house and speed walk. And then that speed walk would turn into a little trot, and that trot would turn into a jog, and then I'd be running before you knew it. And I think it's really dangerous if you get into this habit of like, if I don't do it perfect, it's not good. I'm not going to do it at all. And that's the thing that kills progress in my experience. So even if my morning routine sucks, I'm still going to do it because I have to do it, even if it's horrible. And I find that really helps me create momentum and consistency, because then you'll start to have more good days than not so good days eventually.
And so I'm the same way with exercise. Like there's been a couple times over the years where I've been hurt or something just isn't working the way it should. Yeah. Or maybe I'm just not at 100% strength that day. I'm a little under the weather. I still show up at the gym, and I'm still going to bench. Now, if it's a bad day, my weight might be 50% of what a normal day is.
Right.
But at least I'm going to do the 50% weight. I'm not like, if I just have to do an empty bar, I'll just do an empty bar, but I'm not going to not try. And even if you have a little bit of an injury, you still can go through lightweight motion so that my habit never changes. I keep the habit rolling in spite of whatever life gives me. And it may not be perfect, and that's okay, but we're not going to break the habit.
Yeah, that's super, super important. I've messed that up so many times, and I finally realized, I'm like, wait a minute, back in my fitness days, I wouldn't have this problem. I would just go whether I sucked or not, and it worked out more often than less. So I finally decided to apply that to my business and habits and things like that. So that's been hugely helpful for me.
And so the second thing you talked about was your KPIs. And so here's the question. How do you know what the right KPIs are to begin with? Because that's the most important decision, I would think.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And this is where coaching helps, because I didn't know the answer to that question a year ago. I didn't know the answer to that question. Sometimes I still don't. Like sometimes I'll wake up and I'm like, what should I really be focused on today? So the KPIs for me are focused on marketing, and organic marketing on social media, on my podcast. Like those are things. So I try to focus the KPIs on controllable things, right? It's like, what are things that I can control, that I can do every day that will move the needle eventually? Maybe not right now, but eventually. So those are things such as number of appointments booked. Those are number of posts I've published, number of podcasts, number of emails sent. Those are things such as what was how many podcasts went out last week? It's our volume for that. What kind of, I'm thinking some other ones there that we have that are really big. How many interviews did I do today? Did I get any interviews booked to grow my presence and build my name on social media and online, right? So for me, it's a lot of marketing, because in my business, that's where my time is spent mostly. So for me, yeah, it's marketing. But yeah, going back to knowing what and how, it's like that's where coaching, having someone who's ahead of you, who can look in on your business and say, man, you need to focus your time here, or you need to like not worry about this stuff and you need to focus here instead. That information is invaluable because it can just save you so much time. So you're totally right there. Yeah. What KPIs to measure are the first question to answer before you start measuring KPIs.
And I think part of that, though, is for people to realize that as you're picking your KPIs, you have to pick things that you can affect, not things that are dependent on other people. And so it's more about your activity versus whether or not you get a sale, because you can't guarantee. I mean, yes, we should keep track of sales, but we can't guarantee the sales. But what we can guarantee is that every day we're taking actions that lead to sales. And so it's much easier to track those types of things as well. Am I doing the things that will help me grow my business?
Oh yeah, exactly. And also, if your sales are down, what's your energy level been like? Have you been sleeping good? One of the things I've learned this year through one of my coaches is that, like, if you're in a sales slump, you need to check your sleep. You need to check how much water you're drinking. You need to check what kind of thoughts are going through your mind, and what are you doing outside that's affecting your energy? Because if you're not a leader on the call, if you don't show up with leadership, you're not going to close. And that's been a huge thing to me. So like, I definitely agree there. And I definitely would say to people, like, if you're in something like in a sales slump or whatever it may be, then check your energy and your sleep. And those are things, again, going back to it, Rocky, we can control for the most part what time we go to bed and what time we wake up, so those are other good things to control or take a look at, or maybe would be on someone's KPIs for the day.
And health is a big part of it, because if you're not in top shape, then it's hard for you to deliver the work and do what you're supposed to. You talked about what season in business am I? And you're saying you're asking yourself that daily. I would almost think it's not a daily question. So how does that turn into a daily question?
For me, it's a reminder of what I need to focus on, because I'm not a good focuser. Like, what's one of my weaknesses, I'm not a very good focuser. So I need to have certain things in front of me to say, hey, it's okay that, like, you're letting other things not be your top priority because you're in this season. So for me, in my experience, for me personally, it helps me stay focused on what I need to focus on right now. And yeah, you're right, Rocky. It's probably not it's probably not a normal daily question to ask yourself. I've found for me, it helps me stay grounded and where I need to keep my eyes on the ball, personally. So there's some people with more focus, and maybe a less important question for sure.
And I think it also depends on the business. Yours seems to be maybe a bit more cyclical than maybe some other businesses are. And so that's why when I think of seasons of business, I think much longer term, but you're looking at it probably in a shorter term focus. And so that's fine. I mean, everyone does what works for them. So you talk about what loops am I committed to closing tomorrow? And I know for me, this one was a big struggle, and I've learned to fix it by whenever I have something that needs to be done this week, I open up my calendar and I create a task in the Google Calendar with that task. And so I might put it on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's like, oh, look, there's space there. Just throw a whole bunch of tasks in there. And I look at that task list usually, and I'm like, oh my God, I got 10 tasks to do. And then I sit down and I start doing them. And like 20 minutes later, I'm like, well, that really wasn't a good task list. I'm done already. It wasn't that much, but it's those little things that we forget to do where that seems so big, but really aren't. So how do you handle your loops and closing them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, I've got an executive assistant And we're still trying to piece together what's the best way to go about that. So for us right now, I put it in our Slack channel. I'll say, hey, Eloisa, can you put this on my calendar? And I just copy a link, or any kind of task like that. I just have her, I want to have it in one centralized place. So my tip here is like, wherever you put it, like whether it's written down or whether it's in Slack or it's your Google Cal, commit to putting it in one place so that it's not all over the place. For me right now, it's in a Slack channel that I can refer back to, I can go to, and I can make sure that I have those documented somewhere. So when I do have that time open up, and I've got a time on my calendar called fulfillment, which is kind of like my catch-all, and it's in the morning time, like from 10 to 11:30 in the morning, where anything I need to do for the next day, I put it there, and I have like that standing time. So any kind of open tasks that need to get closed, I just have them there, and I just put them in the next day. That's for me has worked out really well, knowing that I have a place on my calendar 5 days a week to take care of miscellaneous tasks they're important, but they're not, I'm not going to try and put them document them for next Friday or something. I just need to throw them into this little centralized place for that. So yeah, building out space in your calendar and then having a centralized place to kind of document it all, for me, has helped a lot.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And you mentioned having an EA, and this is funny. I'm a lot older than you. And when I first got out of college, it was kind of that shift where before that period of time, everybody had a secretary. Like every right. Manager essentially had somebody whose job it was to answer the phone, right? And screen their calls, to keep their schedule, to, go through the mail and messages and organize their life, to take care of all of the things that needed to get done in life. And they would essentially just constantly be handing these routine tasks to their secretary and say, can you handle this? Can you handle this? And then technology came along, and all of a sudden, even like attorneys and doctors and highly paid people were all of a sudden expected to type their own memos. Like, people didn't type their own memos. They said, hey, send a thank you letter to so-and-so. And that was it. And it got done, and, they sign it because the secretary would bring it. And then we got away from that. Now it seems like with the advent of the EA, it's coming back tremendously into favor. I've struggled back and forth with the EA in the past because it's like, well, what am I going to give my EA? And part of it is a timeliness thing. And part of it is when I had the first EA, like I gave them all this work to do and they did it, which created more work for me. And so it's like, oh my God, this is not working. Right.
Right.
And then it's also how good are they at doing things? So they kept messing up all my scheduling and this and that. And I was like, this is more work than it needs to be. But like now what I do is I have specialized people to do specialized things. So like we have an editor for the podcast. It just goes into flow and he just takes it from there and makes sure that it gets done. I now found somebody to take care of my show notes and do all of that stuff. So now it goes into process and it gets done. And so the other thing I've done is just automate so much. Like when I flipped over to an automated calendar, it was like overnight, it was just amazing because I would just, in the past, you'd send an email, hey, let's get together. What's good for you? And 3 days later, they'd be like, oh, I'm free such and such a time. Well, that doesn't work for like, or they wouldn't even respond because the whole process of scheduling with you was difficult.
Yeah.
Now, when I meet somebody, I just go, hey, it was great meeting you. Love to chat further. Here's my calendar. If you want to meet, schedule a time. And I move on with life. And the next thing I know, my calendar's full because it's made it so much easier. So between having appropriate help and having automated solutions, it has definitely helped. So I know you have an EA. You've been kind of moving up with that. What's been your experience?
Great question. So like you, Rocky, I struggled a lot with other people. Like, I've had bad experiences. I've had like times where it's created more work than others. I've had times where like this person just doesn't get the job or they just don't get it. And I thought I laid it out perfectly, but it's still getting messed up. So I've had a lot of that. My EA now, she's worked with me for about 2 years. So I knew her. She trusted me. I mean, she's like an aunt to me. She's older than me. She's kind of like an aunt to me. So she kind of knows me inside and out quite well. So I think that's for one thing. Like if you have someone who's brand new, expect there to be a month or so or a couple of weeks where it's going to be a lot of growing pains. I found what works really well is if you layer on jobs. For example, a couple of weeks ago, we started with posting. Like I told her, Eloise, I just want you just to post my social media posts. Here they are. Here's what I want. I will tag you in the post when it is ready to be posted. So we just did that. And I met with her twice that week to see how it was going. What questions do you have? Okay, great. They look good. I don't see any problems. Good. Let's keep going. So we did that for 1 week. Till I felt like she got it down packed and she was happy and she was, very confident with it. Then I added something else on. I added, what the heck did I add? I think I added messaging and sending messages to people from my account saying, hey, this is Eloise's assistant. So I layered on the jobs. I didn't give her more than one thing to do before she was good at it. So one thing if you're working with an EA or a VA or however you want to call it, is to layer on your tasks and manage them early. Like expect the first week to have 2 or 3 meetings, 15 minutes, check in. Hey, what questions do you have? Let's look at your work. Does it look good? Is it going to need some work? And did you mess something up? And really coach them through it. So yeah, that's for me. That's what I found. Like you need to be a little bit more hands-on earlier on to make sure they get it and they're producing work up to your level or standard. And then you can move on to new jobs. I think meetings and layering on jobs to me has been hugely helpful to getting that position to where I wanted to be.
And so it's a process. You work together over time and you have to put the effort in. I think too often we don't explain in detail what we're looking for, what the outcome we're expecting and why we're doing certain things because it takes twice as long. But if you put the effort in, then you've probably got a better chance of getting it done than if you don't. So the next one is, it's where did I fall short? So you need to be honest with yourself for that one, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If you spend too much time in your inbox, you're like, you know what? I spent 4 hours in my inbox today. That was stupid. Don't do that tomorrow. So, yeah, it just helps you kind of bring up I spent a lot of time in Facebook today. And I shouldn't have. I told myself I only had 1 hour budgeted and I spent like an hour and a half or 2 hours. So that can't happen tomorrow. So it just really brings up the mess ups, what you fell short. And it makes you type it out. It's like, well, tell me where you messed up, Lewis. So I like that because it just helps me bring it front of mind. And then I can wake up tomorrow like, hey, don't, or if there's 2 or 3 times it's happening, you're like, okay, this is a problem I maybe need to talk to somebody about, So yeah, I love that question because it just helps me be very honest with myself.
And part of it is just getting rid of the distractions to begin with. And there are multiple ways of doing that depending on how and where you access social media, is to sign out of it, to delete apps, to turn off notifications. My phone's on silent all the time. Unless I know I'm expecting a certain call, I leave my phone on silent. So if somebody needs to leave me a message, they leave me a message. It's not the end of the world. I'll get back to them.
Right, exactly. I was going to ask to your Facebook, to the phone thing, is like deleting the app of Facebook or Instagram, whatever you're guilty pleasure is, deleting it off your phone so you can only access it through the desktop has been helpful as a lot too. That's a big one too. If you have a problem with that, or if people struggling with that.
I'm at my desk all the time. I'm not on my phone. I got to get it off my desktop.
Maybe the vice versa for you, Rocky.
Might be vice versa for me. Yes, very much so. And it's also just figuring out there's an appropriate time for everything. And so like I'm sometimes I'll set timers, say, okay, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. It's a reward. And then you set a 10-minute timer, because otherwise you go down a half an hour hole.
Yeah. Pomodoro technique or timers in general have been really helpful, especially when you find yourself really like feeling I'm really uncontrolled right now. I need to start to like tighten up and get a little bit more strict. So that's another great one.
The other thing is just get everything done in the morning, and then it doesn't matter. True.
The easy one. If you're an early morning person, like I'm 6:30, 6 sometimes. So it's like you can get one or two things really good, really well done in that time. But yeah, I don't know what time do you wake up in the morning, Rocky? Are you an early morning person?
I'm up usually prior to 6, depending on the day. Some days it's 5, but I don't usually get out of bed before 6. And then once I'm out, it's either going to the gym or doing my home exercise routine. And then it's once I get back from that is when the day kind of more so starts and things start to get rolling. But usually if I have big things to do in the morning, if I can knock them out, then as long as I get the handful of big things done, the rest of it's okay. It'll get done. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah, totally.
So the next thing is deciding what you need to do versus delegating, deleting, or automating. And I think this is one that people really struggle with, is learning how to let go.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to accomplish this?
It's one of those things where if I look back on my day and I'm like, that was a dumb thing I did. Like I could have had Eloise do that. I could have had someone else do that. I'm like, I need to get this off there. So I will answer that question of just like the thing I need to delegate. It could be scheduling times with clients. It could be performing outreach to old prospects who didn't close. I'm like, well, I shouldn't have done that. So I could probably make an SOP for that. Like, for example, the other day I made 2 SOPs, one for how to write letters and how to like send personal thank you letters to podcast guests, using an automated system. So I did a whole training video on that, so that my EA she just needs for me to write the letter, and then she takes care of it from there. She sends it, she pays for it, the postage, uses my credit card. So I'm out of the picture. That was a task. That was something that was a question that was like, when I asked myself, what do I need to automate, delegate, or delete? I was like, I don't need to, go through and have, like, I do need to write a personal letter, but I don't need to be the one sending the stamp or sending the postage or figuring all that stuff out and getting the address. I can get that done by someone else. So that was one on there that I created an SOP for. So this question helps me figure out, where do I need to build systems and training so that someone else can do it? Or do I just need to stop doing it altogether? Those are the 2 outcomes for this question that I really love.
And I think that's important. Sometimes we do stuff that we think is important, but it's more busy work because we're afraid to do the hard work that needs to get done. And so it's learning to that's why I think a lot of people, I'm so busy. I'm like, not really. You're just doing stuff that's a waste of time because you think it's important, when the reality is you should be doing what's important. And so it's spending the time to figure that out, I think, is a big part of it. So we haven't talked about what your business really is, which is podcasting. And you've actually used podcasting to build relationships, which is essentially what I have done. And that's part of the idea behind my podcast, is that it allows me to meet a ton of people that may or may not have in the past given me an hour of their time. But through the power of podcasting, I get to meet some really, really cool people. What's your advice, and what do you do, and how do you position podcasts as a relationship building tool?
Great question. So for me, so to back up and share what we do a little bit, like I'm basically a done for you podcasting agency. So we support people through just allowing them to only record, and then the rest is done for them. So they don't have to worry about the logistics of posting and publishing and all the editing and all this stuff that normally goes into it. And I know, Rocky, you've got a team, and now like you've done it yourself too. So you know how much work that is. And how much you sometimes when we're in it, we wish we could delegate it. So that's what we do. But for me, or before I even started the business, podcasting was something I was doing on the side to build relationships. For example, when I was 24 or 23 years old, I interviewed it was one of the head of the principals or the head professors at one of Yale's, I think it was one of Yale's like brain science departments. It was a guy who did a TED Talk. And I built a relationship with this guy, and I met him and interviewed him because I had a podcast, and that guy would have never given me an hour of his time. I was a college, a guy with a bachelor's degree in hospitality. I had no business interviewing somebody who was like the head of Yale, one of Yale's like brain research departments, So going to the relationship piece about it, like, I think one of the things we tend to forget is that, yes, all of the tactics and new technology and all this stuff is great, but relationships still sell. Relationships still build empires. Relationships are still critical for business, and you can't automate that. And it may sound cliche, but it's just so true. People do business with guys like you and me, Rocky, because they know us, like us, and trust us, not because we have amazing technology. Not because we have an amazing, sexy sales page. It's because the relationship factor, they trust us, they know us, they like us, right? So for me, relationships, I've always been a bit of a talker, and podcasting for me was an easy way to use my some would call it a talent, some others wouldn't. It was a way to get my foot in the door for a lot of times, and build relationships with cool people that would eventually either turn into maybe just a great relationship, friendship, or a business partnership of some sort. So yeah, that's been my short journey of it. But I'm curious to hear what question did you have around that?
Well, I think people need to realize is, part of building a relationship is to be giving before you're asking.
Yeah.
And giving people a platform to tell their story, to sell their wares, and to be able to do that is always of interest to other people. And so the podcast becomes a big give that you can offer to people that is relatively easy to do, in the sense that it's not as complicated as one thinks. And you essentially have your own radio station, right? So you become your own newscaster, radio host, whatever you want. And it's a pretty powerful way to be able to meet people. And that's one of the biggest things I've seen from others, is just using that power to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's a great point there. Giving before, during, and after the interview, I think there's so much innovation and creativity that can go on there that by the end of the day, if someone interviews or does an interview with your show, you can really make that person feel like, wow, like Rocky did an amazing job. I felt like staying at the Hilton. I was just going on staying at the Four Seasons or something. But the way you create, nurture, and expand that relationship through a podcast is really cool. And I've seen some people do some cool things when it comes to just like, hey, what do we send them after the interview? Or how do we onboard them? Or how do we make sure they look amazing and that we get them some people knocking at their door after the interview or when this show goes out. So I think for me, that's what I've always been excited about. Like, how do we make someone like who doesn't really know us, but knows we want them on our podcast into like a super fan and an advocate of what we do. That's what I love to talk about. It's definitely just a nerd out about.
So what are some of the ways that you do that after the episode?
Great question. I'll tell you some funny stories of some wild things I've seen and heard that can give people some ideas of what you can do. And I wouldn't say you don't need to do this, but you definitely can. So a friend of mine who owns a podcast in Chicago, his name's Kyvan, and he was building a company behind this podcast, and he really wanted to bring on some amazing people, and he wanted them to remember him. So what he did was, are you familiar with Avengers, the Thor movie?
Yeah. Okay.
So Thor's got this amazing hammer, right? It's like this amazing thing that strikes, can call thunder or lightning from the skies. He gave them, all of these guys who went on like the first 10 or 15 people on his podcast, he basically bought a life-size replica of an iron hammer for them and had it shipped to their house. Mind you, this was probably a couple $100 each. And it's something that's so crazy because he showed me the picture of when people got it, they would send him pictures and photos and videos dude, thank you so much. And the relationship built through that cool gift. Don't have to spend that much money. Absolutely not. For those thinking this is going to be expensive. Just an idea for just something to get your mind, wrapped around what you can do. That built that relationship, automatically, because people will walk into that person's house with a Thor hammer and they'll ask about why do you have a Thor hammer in your house? That's just not something you see every day. So it first of all, it builds a story around the time you're on a podcast, that particular person's podcast. And it also helps you basically become unforgettable because you have a Thor hammer in your closet or in your house. So that's one simple thing. It's like a gift. It can be a gift. It can be a personal note. It can be you promoting them and their business on the next podcast, like saying, hey, if you haven't listened to my episode with Rocky, definitely go back and check that out. That was an amazing episode. You guys should go reach out to him and connect with him and see what he's doing. So there's a number of ways: gifts, cards, promoting their stuff, promoting their episode. Another one I've seen, Rocky, is taking the episode and then running ads to it so that they get more exposure. Doesn't have to be a super expensive ad budget. It could be a couple $bucks, but you being intentional about promoting their content and promoting the stuff you guys created together shows a lot of respect for the content and the time they put into creating the episode.
Have you ever read the book Giftology by John Ruhlin?
I have, yes.
Okay, because that is the whole art and science of using gifts to cut through the noise, and he's very big and he's built a whole business around it. Yeah, of creating personalized special gifts based on what that person enjoys and likes, and so they're always remembering you when they're looking at that gift, and so that's a big part of it. Just out of curiosity, have you noticed that ad spends on podcast episodes drive traffic? Because it's one of those things that seems to be a constant. Is it worth it? Right. Yeah. There's a lot of variables in that. I know guys who do it profitably, and I know people who've tried it and failed miserably. So I think it depends on what your goal is. But let's just say if you interview somebody who's big, maybe Pat Flynn. We know Pat Flynn's got an audience on Facebook, and we know he's got a big following. So we could, if we had someone like that on, it may make sense to run some ads to his audience so that his people see it. And he doesn't have to waste time or take the time to promote it on his own. Hey, we're going to help you promote it to your audience because we're going to run ads to it. So it's definitely case by case, but it can be something that you can do to build your audience, which is great. On a low $5-10 ad spend for maybe 2 weeks, just test it out. So everything is with that is testing. Couple other things you could do. You could use Spotify ads, different game there, but you could definitely do it to promote and to get the episode out there more. Again, whether or not it's worth it depends on the goals of what that ad spend is. If it's to show the guest that, you want to kind of be a kind of a promoter and help them, or do you just want to use it to build your podcast? The goals will dictate what kind of metrics or what kind of success what you think is successful. I'm trying to think of some other big things that I've seen people do. If you've seen this, Rocky, but a friend of mine in Colorado showed me this, and it's basically like a box you get in the mail, and you flip it open like a book,
So it's almost like these like very nicely put together, like kind of like hard rectangular boxes, and it's got a screen inside of it. And the screen is basically a custom video message that you send to that person. This is something you can do for if you're marketing, or if you're selling. If you're going to send something cold to a cold prospect, I would do this. Don't send a cold email. Send them a cold video in the mail. I think they cost like $15 to $20 each. But that's one way to make an impression on somebody than a cold email that's out of the blue. But it's basically like a little book that you flip open, and it says like, "Hey, Rocky, loved our podcast episode. Thanks so much for coming on. Again, I really respect your time, and I loved what you said when you shared. I'd be so happy if you shared this episode, but don't feel obligated to. It's only if you want to. Let's make sure we stay in touch." I've seen people send these custom videos, and that's another really cool way to put a very personal touch on it to build a relationship. So, granted, this is something that you want to do if you are reaching out to people who you want to maybe build a business relationship with, because we all want to have a return on our money. But yeah, those are just some ideas just to throw out there that people can maybe run with or figure out some form of variation for their own.
And I think the important thing is to do something outside the ordinary, not what everyone else is doing. Because if you're doing what everyone else is doing, then it has very little to no impact. And I remember when I was in the business world, especially around Christmas, everyone would be sending in cookies. And it's like, okay, 12 boxes of cookies. Nobody cares anymore. It's like, do it in some other time of year when it's least expected. Not when everyone else is doing it. And then you have a much better outcome. So throughout this conversation, you've talked a little bit about coaches. I know you're also involved in mastermind groups. How have coaches and mastermind groups helped you to move forward faster?
Oh, man. I'd say the biggest thing is kind of like, if you get a good coach or a good mentor, they're almost like a mechanic. They can take a look at the engine that is in your business, whether it's your business or whether it's your life, right? They can take a look inside what's going on and give you like, hey, here's the problem. Here's what we think is the issue here. Here's how we can fix that. If you're running or driving a car and you don't know what's wrong, the car's probably going to end up breaking down eventually. It's going to run out of oil. You're not going to change the oil. It's going to have a flat. So having that person who can give you direction and allow you to make less mistakes over the long run, for me has been huge, because I would probably still be in personal training and health and fitness if I didn't have a coach say, "Hey, Lewis, look, you're not that good at that stuff, but you are pretty good at podcasting. So why don't you do that?" A coach can give you that kind of insight that you probably wouldn't be able to see because of your perspective. Like you're so attached and close to your business or your life, obviously, because it's your life, that you can't see the outside. You can't see the big picture. So yeah, outside eyes, I would say, is the biggest thing as to why coaches have helped me personally. And I think it helped a lot of people who are struggling with that aspect.
And removing blinders and preventing mistakes, people don't realize the enormous impact that has on outcomes. It's not always about how fast you go forward, but it's how many missteps did you avoid and how many problems did you not have to go through or try and have to rebound from, that is much, much more important. And plus, we don't see our own value. Other people see our value much better than we do. And so getting that feedback is dramatically important. I know it would have helped me beyond belief had I done that, but I'm okay. It's life, and you take it as it comes, and everything has its good as bad. So that is very, very true. So based on our conversation today, what's one action step people can take to move forward this week?
I would have to go back to the first thing we talked about, which is reviewing your day and reviewing yourself at the end of every day. It's not fun. It's not sexy. But if you take time to reflect on the day and what actually got done and what didn't be done, and being brutally honest, that will help you move the needle the most. whether it's like health and fitness, like I used to weigh myself every day. Some people say no against it, but I liked having the data to say whether my actions produced results or didn't produce results, especially if I was getting ready for a competition. So yeah, like doing the EOD, doing a daily review of some sort, copy my questions if you like, or figure out ones that work for you. But that's the number one step.
And I do that. I weigh every day, and I finally got an app so that it automatically keeps track of it. And once a week I do measurements, and it gives me historical perspective. So I know where I'm going and what's happening. And it's a big, big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's good.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
The secret to I think for me, and I'm only 28, so I've probably got a ton more to learn about this, so I'm not going to act like I know everything. But the thing that's worked for me right now has been gratitude. And I realize what I have, it's really easy to live in abundance and be thankful for where I'm at.
You know, it's funny. I think over the last 3, 4, 5 episodes, it's been very much the same theme. I think it's the theme of the moment for everyone is, life is actually pretty good, and we need to just appreciate that. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Gosh, it's either a split between understanding that there's people out there you should just model and stop trying to learn it yourself. Like, go and find people who've actually done it. Don't sit here and try and recreate the wheel. Other one I'm pretty tied between is understanding how to be organized and how much that will save you headaches. So those two.
I'm always amazed at how difficult some people have with getting stuff done. I'm like, life isn't that difficult. Just do it. Like,
yeah.
They spend 10x the time focused on not doing something as they would have if they had just done it and moved on. It's amazing. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
That is so hard. Being that I'm only 10 years, I'm thinking of my 10-year-old younger self. You're 18, so you're probably coming out of high school. If you're a guy, you probably got way too much testosterone and you're way too big of an ego. Or maybe that's just me. So I would say, seek wise counsel. That's what I would say. One thing is seek wise counsel. Find people who are smarter than you and learn from their mistakes. Don't make all of the dumb mistakes on your own.
Yeah, but they're 18. There are no wise people. And it takes a wise person to realize they're only 18 and they don't have all the answers. And so that's very, very true. If people would like to find you, connect, learn more about your podcasts and services, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'd love to gift the audience a book. If anyone's looking at starting a podcast, then hopefully this book will help you. It's a book I wrote a few years ago. It's called How to Get Your First 100,000 Downloads in 100 Days. And the easiest place to grab that for free, it'll be the PDF. There's an Audible version you can buy as well. But the free version is over at podcastdomination.co, not .com, podcastdomination.co/PDF. And that will take you right to the book. You can enter your name and email and grab the book for free there.
Cool. And I will put that in the show notes to make it easy for people to find it. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, this was fun. Thank you.
This podcast has allowed me to meet so many amazing people that I never would have been able to without one. I love chatting also about how to create systems and manage time and get stuff done with Lewis. We're coming up on the end of 4 years here. January 1st will be the beginning of the 5th year of this podcast. And I can tell you it's been an amazing journey. I've had a lot of fun doing it. And I thank you all for listening and coming along with me on this journey. Today's action step was to review your day and what you did or didn't get done. And I think that's an important thing, you know? How are we taking action? Are we getting done what we want to get done? Or are we goofing off? And having a daily review, ending your day appropriately, also helps to make the next day even better. Our next episode's really cool. I've got Janet McKee on to talk about effortless success, and I know you're going to love it. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with some friends and family. Put it up on social media. I would appreciate that. Thank you so much for listening. Have an abundant week.